Welcome back to Weekends with Whitney. Well, it was 10 years ago today that the levees had breached and all of us were in the midst of a crisis here in Louisiana. And I don't know if you're like me, but I can't believe how many things I had forgotten about that storm. And I was on the news desk 12 hours a day. And I wonder if that's a protective mechanism or what it really says about us. Is it a good thing, a bad thing? Dr. Nick joins us this morning with more. Good to see you.
Good morning, Whitney. And I do remember that you were at that desk 12 to 15 hours a day.
a.m. midnight until 12 the next day.
Yeah.
And then there were about 3 or 4 other hours after that helping people do different things. Your friend was one of them. You reached out to me.
Yeah, and there were a number of us, probably not to the degree that you were, but certainly the adrenaline was flowing.
Oh, yes.
In all the helping community. That's one of the reasons why I think some of our memory is a little sparse, because we were so caught up again in the adrenaline flow and in just the volume and the crisis point and just the nature of the disaster. I mean, I was with a group this morning of elders who have memories of it that I was talking with, and we were talking about how, you know, when you look back on it, it really was a constitutional crisis is the first thing. The mayor, the governor, and the president. We really didn't know who was in charge.
No.
And for a number of days, and this is not a negative, it's just that it was a constitutional crisis.
Yes.
The governor, I think, runs the National Guard, but it took a few days to get that going.
Then Michael Brown trying to come in and run everything.
Brownie, and then if you remember, again, the crisis of watching it, 24 hours of constant watching and feeling so helpless, which was one of the things that these people were saying, that sense of helplessness all over the country. And a great city, then you had the aftermath of whether we bring it back because it's under sea level. Remember the whole issue with the dome, which I'm grateful that we pulled it back because I think it was a symbol of restoration.
Right.
This was really a national crisis at its worst, and yet it brought out the best. The churches came through, the centers came through, the shelters came through, Baton Rouge came through, even with all that turmoil of this city and the traffic.
We had people like, I mean, just my across the street neighbors, Sean and Jill Burks, who went and they fed these people. I mean, they would just volunteer to cook big vats of things, and you know, down at the PMAC and down at the River Center, and everyone doing something that they could.
Yes.
And you said earlier that the people that you were with today, none of them were directly affected, but you know, I would challenge that we were all directly affected in some way. Baton Rouge's population, just exploded.
Yes.
We had traffic that was terrible. We had grocery stores and grocery store lines and a lack of a lot of things. Gas, remember how long it would take you to get gas?
Yes, and I also remember that I was driving a hybrid. And so I was getting 50 miles to the gallon and was so excited. But you're right, this group, and thanks for bringing that up, do you know 20, 30 minutes into it, they started remembering. It's the block. It's the block, and they started remembering. People in Shreveport in the group started remembering. Someone in Dallas said, "Oh, I do remember, you know, all the people coming into Dallas, and I do remember watching the television and wondering why are these people not being fed, you know." And Whitney, one of the things that I was also thinking about, I know that we like to hold terrorism to ISIS and people like that. Do you know that in many ways this was an act of terrorism because it was experienced as terror? The water and the wind, we went to bed Sunday night thinking we had survived it. Remember?
Yeah.
And then Monday morning we woke up to the dams had broken.
And the
water was coming in. And the terror of water and wind. Mother Nature. And again, I know we don't like to use the word that way, but it's true. It was an act of terror. We were terrorized by Mother Nature. And shows the power.
Yes, and speaking of power, the power of how New Orleans has been able to come back.
Yes.
I mean, I'm shocked at where we are 10 years later and how vibrant of a city it is. And it's people who decided to go back. I'll use your sister Angela. Bought in Lakeview. And it was underwater, had a lot to do to the house.
Sure did. And as I have said to you personally before, I take some credit for that because she didn't want to go back. And I said, Angela, you are 40 years old. This city is going to come back and you can be a part of it. And today, she is so proud of what she has done, as many are proud of
Oh,
what
yes.
they've done. But it's also interesting too, Whitney. I just wanted to mention, you know, I helped with it for 3 years.
Oh, I know.
was involved with
Tell
it.
people how involved you were.
A lot of it. Well, I was supervising the effort from the emotional and actually the emotional point of view.
The Hurricane Relief Project.
Many people didn't even have. They didn't know. You don't know what your prescriptions are if you take. I don't know what my prescriptions are, and I take something for cholesterol and high blood pressure. If I lost that prescription, people didn't have access. They didn't have no paperwork to their homes.
No.
These were handed down, and then a lot of the people that came in. This is what's fascinating to me. They were traumatized, but they needed jobs, and where were the jobs and the helping? So the government was providing money to help people, and it's almost like me being a therapist in a group of depressed people, and I being depressed. Do you see how that was conflictual? And it was a dual
Absolutely.
hat, but I think it turned out to be helpful.
Yes, yes.
I think it turned out to be helpful.
Yes.
Just
yes.
as for you, you weren't traumatized, but you had a house full of family.
Oh, we had like 20 people living with us.
I mean, and I think this was one of the things they talked about, is how many of them had families in for 2, 3, 4 months.
It's a long time.
And how hard it got on them.
Yeah. And I will say, it was especially hard on me because I was up all night. So I'd get up at 11, shower, get to work. You had to get there a little early, so sometimes I get up at 10:30, because you had to find out what happened while you were sleeping. And then, go to work, do all that. I was emotionally exhausted when I came home.
Of course.
And they were living it up.
Sure. And waiting for you to help, possibly.
Yeah.
But what
Just
about
no
when,
energy.
and what about when I called you? And because I thought, Whitney, I think it's such an incredible story. It's a book. You had the poorest of the poor in the dome with horrible atrocities taking place. Then you had the richest of the rich that went to Windsor Court to play bridge.
Right. You had friends at the Windsor Court.
I had friends there. And I called you and said, Whitney, they're willing to pay thousands. Can you get a helicopter in? And you were like, I just don't have any energy. I don't have it.
I can't coordinate that rescue effort. But I tell you, a helicopter was about the only thing, and the Coast Guard,
But
did
you know,
great
they
work,
did
but
get out. They
did.
finally did
How
get
did
out.
they finally get
They
out?
drove out at 4 a.m. in the morning, terrified of what they called might be a thug war. Because, there was looting. Let's be honest, there was looting.
There was looting.
It was a need
but it was so over-exaggerated.
But there was also a need for survival, Whitney. I mean, you get hungry after a few days.
You get thirsty after a few days.
You get thirsty after a few days, and sandwiches again started finally dropping in. See, I remember it all. It's just not as traumatic to me as it is, I think, to the people that directly experienced it.
And remember when we went to Renaissance? Remember they moved all the FEMA trailers over there, and we spent some time there?
Yes, and how grateful they were that you came out.
Well, we're just grateful, period.
But I mean, and how I remember you being so awestruck at their resilience.
That's it.
The resilience of the human spirit is what this 10th anniversary should be about.
That's right.
The resilience of the human spirit and the human community that came together to help it out.
Amen. Thanks.
10th anniversary.
Thanks, Nikki.
Great to be with you, Whitney.
Thanks. Much more Weekends with Whitney right after this.